Hi, Lindner here from adventurequilter.com. We're standing outside my home in sunny Florida, and I want to welcome you in as I show you the quilts that I have on display in my home. I thought it might provide a little entertainment for you and for me during this time of social distancing. So welcome. Here we are just inside my front door, and I'm going to first show you the quilts in my dining room. This is one of my favorites called Hopes and Daydreams. As you can see, it's pretty large, and guess what? I painted the wall color to go with it. I love it. I love the bright colors. It does have some small pieces in it and some beading. And it was made with a technique similar to machine applique, which means I didn't actually piece any curved seams, and that's a good thing. Looking on the opposite side of my dining room, we see this quilt, which is called Mango-licious. I designed it by taking a photo of some mangoes and then used a feature in my computer called Posterize, and that allowed me to turn those smooth colors into sort of chunks of colors, which became very good patterns for me. As you can see, I've done a good bit of contour stitching, and that's what actually holds the quilt together. This is my technique these days. I make a design, I glue it or pin it lightly together, take it to the sewing machine without having created a top per se, and then the quilting holds everything together for me. Here's another quilt called Maybe a Maple. I was doing this quilt inspired by just a few dancing leaves on a local tree, and because it was winter I couldn't identify what kind of tree it was. Turns out it was a crepe myrtle. But I've been saying maybe it was a maple for months, and so I just stuck with that title. Because the leaves that I had seen for inspiration were dancing in the breeze, I wanted to make some of them 3D so you can see that I've done that. That was fun. Now let's move on into the living room, and I'll show you this quilt called Ripening. It's inspired by a local palm called a Christmas palm, and as you can see, in December it has both red and green berries on it at the same time, thus the name. I originally made it to the interior dimensions and then decided I needed it larger, so I had to figure out what to do for the border. I decided that just a continuation of the design in darker colors would be the right thing to do. So on the edges I was able to find darker fabrics and continue that way. But for the top and bottom, I used the original tree trunk fabric continuing, and then I just simply overlaid it with 2 layers of tulle. In this case, I think it was 1 layer of brown and 1 layer of black. The shadows gave me quite a time. I actually used black organza initially, and finally I got tired of that idea and just actually drew in some shadows with black marker before it was all said and done. Also in this room, I have some interesting things, some that maybe have had their fun and ready to be moved out. This quilt falls into that category. I made it to fit this corner, as it does nicely. It's called Flash of Green #1, and I like it, but I'm not really using these colors anymore, so I'll be swapping this one out before too long. Up here above my TV are not quilts, but they're glued collages. The tops are done with fabric, and then the bottom is just paint. The dilemma was, what kind of artwork do you put above your TV? I figured it should be either wider or narrower, and so these 4 were my attempt to solve that decorating dilemma. And they are all considered one piece of art, and they're called Horizon Line. You can see the top has got some rough edges where the fabric was glued, I overpainted some white to get that really pastel blue at the bottom, and then the bottom is painted with acrylic paints. It was a fun project, and I'm very happy with the proportions. I think they work well. Heading into my breakfast room, I'll show you a quilt made by Elizabeth Barton. She has hand-dyed all of the fabrics in the quilt and has used a variety of surface stitching to attach the various pieces. It was inspired by a castle in Lindner, Scotland. In my kitchen, I've got a couple of small pieces. This one up here is glued again, and it's called cruciform something, some number, cruciform number 1, we'll say. Here's another one of mine. This one is called Out of the Blue. I started it in a class with Emily Richardson, and she had us painting both sheers and opaque fabrics in the same colors, and it gave quite a nice collection of fabrics to work with and design with. Let's see if I can go the other way. There we go. All right, let's see. My son was nice enough to clean up his room for us so that I can show you one of my favorite quilts. And if you've been to my website, you recognize this one because it's on the home page. And it's called Crotons. It's about 60 by 40. Everybody's always surprised when they see a quilt in person because it looks so small on the internet, and we don't realize maybe quite how big it actually is. This one, again, inspired by a photo of my croton on my back porch. And then I had a bit of fun using interesting colors like blue veins and things like that on it. On the other side of the house now, we're heading into the office that I share with my husband. And I love this piece. It's called Carefree. It shows my son on the right with 2 of his cousins, and they're skipping down the farm lane on the farm where I grew up that's still owned by my parents. This one started as a photo, and I actually manipulated the photo and then printed it onto fabric. And so with that photo right in front of me on the fabric, then I was able to collage the people just by cutting and placing fabrics exactly the way that I saw them on the photo. And I love the result. And of course, it has a lot of sentimental value to me as well. Switching around and looking the opposite direction. Here's a quilt. Wow, I've done so many quilts of tea plants and crotons. They're both bright tropical plants, and I love anything bright and with high contrast. So this is called Tea Plants Aglow Glow. Again, Japanese tea plants, and they really glow almost like stained glass when lit from behind. So these are my neighbor's tea plants that I saw every day, every afternoon, lit from behind, and they inspired this quilt. Again, I'm working with raw edge collage, which makes it great because, for instance, this border on the left didn't initially exist, but I decided it needed it. I just came and placed some fabrics there. I needed these petals then, these leaves, to extend over there. No problem. I just, cut a bigger chunk and stuck it down in. I have a lot of fun working with a variety of fabrics. These days I'm doing a lot of hand dyeing, but up till then I was making sure that I had polka dots and plaids and all sorts of different fabrics and textures in my pieces. And I just love doing that sort of thing. Again, I'm creating it as a collage on my design wall, glued to some muslin so that I can eventually get it to the sewing machine. And then when I get to the sewing machine and quilt it, that's what holds it together. All right. Y'all are in so much luck. I'm actually going to show you my bathroom. I must really like you. Okay, here's a piece that's very different. It's called After Much Consideration. I was doing it to try out Deirdre Adams' technique of stitching first and then painting lightly on top. I would say my results are acceptable. Since I have it hanging in my home, I would hope so. But I won't be doing it again, partly because I didn't do it nearly as well as she did, and partly because it just wasn't fun for me to do all that stitching and wait until I could do anything colorful at the end. So probably not my cup of tea. I don't think I'll be doing those. Deirdre does a fantastic job, and I don't need to try to emulate her. Okay, another bathroom. This piece is glued, and of course fabric works really well in a bathroom because it doesn't mind humidity and so forth. This is a glued collage. So I've cut pieces of fabric and glued them down, and then that's great. You know, when you get it glued in place, it's done. You don't have to stitch or add a sleeve or anything like that. I did have a little happy accident right here where one of the hand-dyed fabrics bled. At first I thought, oh no. But then I really decided that I liked it, and so I just purposely added a few more little bleeding types of spots, and there you go. This is the sample for a class I teach online called Sticky Fingers, and I think I'm going to be turning that into an ebook before too long. Now here we have the proverbial spot above the toilet. You know, you always need some art there, but nothing is the right size. So I made this one specifically to go here. It's called Red Strata. If you ever attend my lecture, Confessions of a Fabric Whisperer, you will see a ton of in-progress photos about this quilt and hear about some of the things I tried. So it's got cheesecloth, silk, sheer cloths, lots of hand embroidery, all of which I was just kept throwing things at it, trying to get it to have a little bit more of a focal point. Eventually I added some beads, and so finally I'm pretty happy with it now, and it certainly fits that spot and serves its function very well. Okay, and then in my master bedroom, the big thing that catches your attention, of course, is this quilt hanging over the bed. It's called Rhythm of the City, and it's one of the first that I did with completely, exclusively fabrics that I had hand dyed. So as you can see, I was in a grid phase, but I love these colors, and so it gave me a nice opportunity to use some bright color, and about that time I was redecorating my bedroom, and haha, I got to use lovely teal green. This little quilt over here is called Croton Leaves number 2. It's a tiny little quilt that's about maybe 8 by 10. And the thing that I love about this presentation is it's been mounted. Let me look again. Can you see that reflection of glass right there? And it reflects only in the white area, not in the quilt itself. That's because the quilt is sitting on top of the glass. And I really love that. It allows you to see all the textures of the fabric, but yet it gives you the finish of having that white matte showing around the edges. And so you just buy a pre-purchased, a pre-made frame that comes with the mat and the glass and everything, and you assemble it together, and I really like doing that with the smaller pieces. In this next corner, again, we have a glued piece, this time glued with magazine pages. And what did I name this? I think I just named it Three Cherries. Don't you love those colors? Man, I'm in love with this color combination. And so it's great fun. You're using magazine pages and you're tearing them, so you get little bits of text and things in there. And because you're tearing it, it's automatically going to be a little bit loose, which is sometimes hard to make ourselves do that. So I think it's a pretty cool technique. It takes a while, but not longer than making a quilt. And then one final piece here. This is called Brainstorming. And it was a result of one of those wacky exercises you find in an art book. And then you do some hideous things to a piece of page of paper, and then you try to find interesting designs within just little portions. So this was one such example. And then I liked it well enough that I turned it into a quilt. I like it. Thanks so much for joining me. That was fun for me, and I hope it was for you as well. I'll be doing some more videos, like one of my studio and my storage. And until then, you can find me on adventurequilter.com and adventurequilter.com/blog. Also, I have a monthly newsletter that comes to you via email, so you'll see a way to sign up for that on my website if you'd like to. See you next time. Bye.